Seems to be recording.
It's recording, yay.
Very good. I'd like to call this town board meeting to order at 6:35 on Monday, June 7th, 2021. This is a continuation of our work on the zoning code that we've been working on for about a year now. Town board has been working on it for God knows how long, but this town board is committed to continuing and finishing this job in the very near future. So thank you to all town board members who are here. And Bonnie Franson, thank you so much for organizing us once again. And so let me give you the microphone.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Ken, I was muted. And did you need to like formally open the meeting, or we're all good for today?
We just opened it.
I just
Okay.
did that. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. All right.
Can I just quickly say one thing, Ken? We don't forget we have to set the date for the public hearing for the CDBG. Just want to. We can't.
So let's do that right now. So the town board needed to set a date for the public hearing on the CDBG Community Development Block Grant. We need to give 10 days notice. So I sent out an email today saying that the next date that would meet that challenge would be the 17th. I did receive a couple of responses. So let me just poll the town board members that are here. I think, Michelle, you answered positively, yes, right?
Yes.
Maria?
Not me, because I'm in California. I'm at niece's wedding that day.
How about you, Jay?
Our night.
Okay.
That's a Thursday, right?
Yep. It would probably be a pretty short meeting. I can't imagine it being more than a half an hour.
That's fine. I don't have anything on the calendar, so I will put that on the calendar.
Okay, so it'll be imperative that the three of us are there to have a quorum. And so I'm writing it on my calendar and formally that on Thursday, June 17th, town board will have a public hearing. Now, Michelle, could you specify what the goals are for this? I think there are very limited reasons as to how we can apply for CDBG funding. Is that correct?
That is correct. CDBG has a list of eligible projects, but the town of Tuxedo is basically only eligible for senior projects and ADA accessible projects because of our median income of the town as a whole.
Yes, and when we were looking at this last year, I was working with Elena to see if there was a way to parse out incomes by, zip code or neighborhood. And, everybody likes to rag on the park, but even if you cut the park out, we still are too well off to get a lot of these grants. I mean, good for us, but, anyway.
It was a good try. It was worth
California. You know what? California is 3 hours before. So if we do it early, what time were we thinking of doing? Is 6:30 or 7? If it's like 3, if it's going to be a short meeting, I might be able to make it even though I'm away.
7 p.m.
So 7 would be 4 o'clock in California.
Yes.
I mean, if we do like a half-hour meeting, I might be able to do it because I don't think the rehearsal dinner is until later. But I can't, I don't want to.
Well, as long as the three of us have the quorum, then.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, don't be sorry.
When you say senior projects, are we talking physical construction or are you? And
Senior
I'm not really
citizen.
clear. This is due, I believe, on the 25th. So
Talking about a meeting.
Citizens.
are you taking that on, Michelle?
Yeah, I spoke with Al Fusco today. And, we want to go take a look at the train station to see if the bathroom's there, if there's enough room to to have two bathrooms, one ADA accessible and one not. Or if having ADA bathroom at the train station, if that would mean we would only have one bathroom, do we want to do that or not?
I think the men's room is large enough to be ADA as it stands.
Okay, good.
I haven't been in,
there, so I
I haven't
don't
been in the
know.
ladies' room. Anybody who says I have is lying. But I'm assuming it's about the same size, or if not larger, so.
Okay, so then also we talked about ADA bathrooms at Murphy Field. Because there's already a building there. So we could do that.
Okay,
So Jay, would you like to see if we can find a time to meet
Fine,
with
yeah.
Al and go over it? Check out the facility, or maybe we don't even need Al. You and I could just go and measure.
Sure.
Okay.
Sometime before the 17th, when do we need to do this?
Exactly. Sometime for the 17th. I'm around this weekend if that, especially Saturday. I'll be at the farmer's market.
Yeah, I'll be at the farmer's market at some point. I'll bring a tape measure and we'll sneak off to the bathroom together.
yeah, I'll be there too.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we have a public hearing on the CDBG grant application. The meeting will be on Thursday, June 17th at 7 PM. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Michelle Lindsay. Take a roll call vote. I'll start with Michelle Lindsay,
Aye.
Maria May,
Aye.
Jay Reichgott,
Aye.
and myself, Ken English, aye. Dave McMillan is absent. And so the motion has passed to have the CDBG public hearing on Thursday evening, June 17th at 7 PM. Thank you. I know that Marissa Delbaum is on this, so, and we're recording this. So I think we're good to go to our workshop. Thank you for your
Okay.
patience, Bonnie. Please go ahead.
Sure. So, I did share this screen. Can you see it or it's not?
Not yet,
No.
but sometimes it takes a minute.
Okay, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Share, come on. Screen 3.
Oh, it's coming up.
Okay. Got it? All right.
Yeah.
So Ken did us the favor of excerpting pages that I had highlighted and some where I had comments. So I think we can start with that. And I'm still on, right?
You are.
Okay. Some strange
There's
page
a
came
call.
up.
Okay, the problem is there's a call-in user. Do you know? Would you please identify yourself?
Russ?
Oh,
Shaver?
Russ. Okay. Hi, Russ.
Yes. How are
Okay.
you? I had
Good.
trouble here.
Okay, it is causing a little background noise, so I'm going to mute you. Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
You can always press *6 if you want to unmute yourself.
I'm gonna mute myself and then unmute when I need it, just in case.
Okay. All right. I think that helped, right, Bonnie?
Yeah, it did help. So I'm just gonna move this little box here. Agricultural industry, we talked about differentiating that from other industries and what that might include. I think originally we had talked about, or I had suggested something called agribusiness. So what we included in this definition was a use involved in the processing, warehousing, and distribution, marketing, and retailing of agricultural products. Definition shall not include slaughterhouses, animal rendering, high-density animal farming, or frankly, anything that would be a processing. It's really and of that nature. So that the potential existed to have some kinds of food related industries, agriculture related industries within the LIO zoning district. So I don't know if there are any comments on that definition.
Does it make sense ever to have, examples? I mean, are you talking about um, preparing vegetables, for frozen
Like
kind of
flash
product?
freezing, yeah. I mean, we could put examples, uses include such
Yes.
as, if that's
Such-
helpful.
It might be to see, to further make it more clear what we're going for here.
Okay. So it was a little bit more expansive.
The distribution of where this would be permitted, correct?
Yes, I believe we only have it in the LIO. So it is limited in where it can go. And there isn't a lot of LIO in the town. But it was just another one of those ways of expanding a little bit more the uses that could possibly be accommodated in the town. The
When it
next,
says retailing, would that include a farmer's market?
no, because we've defined that separately and that's allowed. So this is something related more to industry. But the way some of our industry descriptions and definitions are written, it doesn't really anticipate agriculture per se. So that's why we kind of created this separate use. Now, I have a comment under agritourism use. This definition has been in the prior drafts. This came out of a discussion with Jay. And in general, it has to do with whether or not the town allows bed and breakfasts. And some history on that, a while back with the former town board, there was in the proposal to include bed and breakfasts in various locations in the town because of the fact you're next to the park system. And why wouldn't people want to operate a bed and breakfast for hikers, for others who may be visiting the town? And there was a public meeting at which many, many residents came out, especially from the north end of town, because a particular individual at that time was essentially saying, if we allow bread and breakfast in the town, you're allowing boarding houses. So, at this point in time, bed and breakfasts are limited really to this adaptive reuse, where someone can take a more historic building and in the promise of protecting and preserving the historic building, they get the ability to do a bed and breakfast. So, the comments raised, fast forward to where we are now, many years later, number one, does the town want to entertain a bed and breakfast? And your bed and breakfasts are limited to locations where the dwelling is owner occupied. It's not something that someone could buy a house and then rent it out and rent it to, people who want to come to the bed and breakfast. This is also closely related to Airbnbs, which the town hasn't really discussed. We haven't really tackled. I think that's a subject in and of itself that you probably want to tackle at some point. But that is different from the concept of the bed and breakfast, where it's someone's home, it's owner occupied, and they allow on a weekend a couple people to, rent rooms. And some of the control over it is because there is this owner occupancy component. So the discussion is, do you want to, at this point, broaden where you allow bed and breakfasts that are owner occupied? Or number two, do you want to kind of hold off on that discussion at such time as you discuss more broadly Airbnbs?
I'd say hold off on it. I think the definition as it stands covers what you were describing, Bonnie. on premises owner. I think there's a guest log required, and that really distinguishes a bed and breakfast, and that a meal has to be served as well, I believe.
Mhm.
But we're currently limiting that to only, I can't remember, only adaptive reuse, or I can have it.
Adaptive
Anywhere.
reuse, adaptive reuse. So it's not necessarily limited in places in zoning districts, but in that zoning district, it's the adaptive reuse of a historic building.
Right. First, I got to buy a historic building, and then I can turn it into a bed and breakfast.
If you live in a historic building, you get to have it as an option.
We can let it lie for now.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared to launch into that discussion.
So right now, guys, we'll just let it sit. Yeah.
It needs to be addressed because isn't there somebody in Laurel Ridge that's supposedly doing it and people are unhappy?
With the short-term rentals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you do need to address it. And number one, you need to decide whether you're even going to allow it, because there are some communities that just don't allow it. And they either they don't allow it at all, period. Or as an alternative, they may allow something like a bed and breakfast with, restrictions.
So I'm
But
under the
again-
impression that it's already in the code and apparently it's not being enforced. I'm not really clear about that. Is this a zoning or a code enforcement issue?
I don't know. I mean, if the zoning is silent on it,
Again, I don't think this is a topic we're going to resolve right now. And I feel like we're going down another rabbit hole here. So we got way too many things to start exploring, the ones that weren't even highlighted in yellow.
okay.
And so, yeah, that was just a comment that had been raised. Boarding house, that's just something that Howard has to review. Business park, this is the definition for a business park. And, essentially it's an area of land that can, allow a variety of uses. And in terms of those uses, buildings can be located on the same property or they could be on individual lots. But importantly, there's a sort of a unified design, a unified operation, a unified management of how the business park is maintained. And you all decided you wanted to allow it in certain zoning districts. So we added the use previously in the table of use regulations, but this is a definition for it now.
So this needs some editing in there. There's some redundancy in the where it says a business park may be in a single ownership, but shall, I guess, be managed under unified control. The site may be subdivided into individual parcels or may be maintained in single ownership, but it must be operated and managed under unified control. So let's just.
I'll straighten that out. Okay, I'll add a note.
Can we go back for a minute? I'm sorry. So as someone who doesn't have a summer house and have daughters who are millennials, we use Airbnb a lot. And I have to tell you, if we want to get people here, like I've never been to Socrates, but last Christmas we went there for Christmas. We rented an Airbnb for a few days. And it was like really beautiful. And I thought, oh my God, maybe that would be a good place to retire or a good place to move to or whatever, And I was thinking, why are we doing that? Why are we limiting that choice? I mean, millennials, that's how they get to know places. That's how they get out of their city dwellings and go check places out, and they like it and then they end up there. And I just, I mean, I'm not saying we have to make the decision tonight, but I'm thinking, I don't think people should think about it as an imposition. I mean, I think people should think about, like it was a perfectly nice house. We've stayed there. I'm going to San Diego and staying in an Airbnb. I mean, this is the we're 2021, and that is a place to get people to come to your town. So I think that for us to just go, I'm not gonna take that option because you don't want people in your neighborhood, I think that's like really short-sighted. So just
I
leaving
I
that
agree
there
with you,
for
Maria.
years.
I agree with you, and I think it's something we should pick up. But I think it's going to be it's going to be there's going to be a process there. Especially there's going to be a process in education, I think, to a lot of townsfolk, and sufficient control. So I think that I think we should put a lid on the zoning, and then we can come back, and the First Amendment can be the B&B rules.
Yeah, I think otherwise you may end up engaging in a focus on this particular use where there may be more public input needed and potential controversy. And at this point in time, I think you don't need to add that to this particular zone. It can be an amendment after you've had those conversations and research on them. Because they can be problematic, especially when the owners aren't there. And so there's, for every positive story, there's a negative story. And so it has to be regulated properly.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not seeing this necessarily, especially exclusively as a zoning code issue. It goes way beyond that. And that's why I would respectfully ask that we table that item.
Yeah, I'm just saying that, as a person who uses that service, I think that that's a great way to get to know a place if we want people to get to know us. So I get it. I'm leaving it there, but I just want to let you know that,
You're supportive of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Added some definite definitions for central sewer and central water. And it's not necessarily just a public system, in part because you have some, I would call almost quasi-public systems. They're regulated by Department of Health, but they're not, these aren't necessarily town-owned utilities that you have if they're serving some of the neighborhoods.
Such
Any
as the
comments?
woodlands.
Yeah, so the Woodlands,
It's just a
Laurel Ridge.
definition, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just to have something there because we make reference to it. So we broke out heavy assembly as opposed to light assembly. And actually, to some extent, this is in your code now. It's assembly or packaging of products from previously prepared materials, including but not limited to, and it gives you some of the examples of what you might be processing or assembling. But then we added no more than 35% of the gross floor area of an assembly use shall be used for distribution of assembled materials, which shall include any area dedicated to loading platforms and loading docks. And the intent there was so that you didn't get a major, just purely distribution facility with all trucks, that there was something more going on than just that. And so that's why that limit is on there. I don't know if you have any comments or reactions to it.
well, in Southfields, we already have something like that, right?
Carlin?
Huh?
Carlin?
Carlin, yeah, that's kind of like that, right?
I don't know to
Honestly,
what
the bad
extent
thing
they're
is the
actually
people who live here hate that. Hate the fact that that was put there against the wishes of, people who live here, but they do keep the place nice and, fine, but
Yeah, I think they may actually do, I don't know if it's just purely assembling they're doing or if they're doing some manufacturing, but they have been there a long time.
Yeah. But there's
Yes.
huge trucks and, like we have tiny streets and the trucks get stuck and, it's
Yeah.
not optimal.
Okay. All right, hotel. Commercial use consisting of overnight accommodations and guest sleeping rooms within a building or group of buildings regularly provided and offered to the public for a period of less than 30 consecutive days for compensation, and which is customarily open to transient guests. Accessory uses to a hotel may include, and then we give examples of what may be considered accessory, and that, the specifics will be determined during a special use permit review. Any
Bonnie, I
comments?
thought we were adding a line about entrance, via lobby as opposed to motels which have doors at front right on the parking lot for each room.
I think I have that in the special use permit requirements.
Okay.
So we'll take a look at that, but I'm just gonna add a comment about, it can be added to the definitions. Lobby location. So we'll cover that when we get to the specifics of the special use permit for a hotel. Any other comments? And the period of 30 consecutive days, that's just typically used. Because the special permit can be varied by the planning board, in theory, if you get a Marriott extended stay, they may actually have more than 30 days. Sometimes if you want to leave the 30 days in there, and the reason is because, when you're beyond 30 days, technically you can become a resident of New York State. So the idea is to keep it, transient in nature. And in theory, you could move rooms, and then, you're starting a new stay in a different guest sleeping room. So, again, it's more of a concern, I think, in communities where the potential exists for these hotels to be converted to something other than a hotel and not to be transient anymore. But this is kind of standard language that you find in many of the definitions. Okay. Here are your definitions of light assembly and light industry. So in this instance, we were differentiating light assembly by saying that it's not going to occupy more than 5,000 square feet of gross floor area, and that anything exceeding that gross floor area or relying on heavy duty vehicles would be deemed a heavy assembly use. And so that in some way allows you to have some flexibility where light industry goes as compared to what we're calling light assembly versus heavy assembly. Any comments?
No.
No. Okay. So next is light industry. Use engaged in manufacture predominantly from previously prepared materials of finished products or parts, including process, fabrication, assembly, treatment, packaging, and incidental storage, distribution of such products, but excluding basic industrial processing. And that there has to meet the performance standards set forth in the zoning chapter. As a reminder, frankly, all the uses have to meet the performance standards, but it's particularly important when it's a light industry use. Okay. So there is some overlap between what we're calling a multiple use non-residential development and what ultimately we called a multiple use non-residential development, a business park. So these really, if you read this definition, which has been in the code for a while, is also kind of referring to almost like a shopping center. So my question to you is, do you think that these two definitions and their intent may get confusing between this and the business park definition? Because this does talk about retail, commercial, other non-residential uses, a building or buildings, but you'll see, there's a common theme here to the business park, which is unified architectural treatment and signage, interrelated parking and site circulation, individual establishments, shared amenities, common spaces. And that's kind of similar to what a business park can be too.
So what's the difference between this and a business park?
Yeah, that's why I know.
So I think the way this was set up, this is probably broader perhaps in a business park, because a business park we don't typically think of as a retail use going in it. So this would also include the concept of shopping centers. And business park is more along the lines of, normally we would say office uses, light industrial uses, manufacturing uses. But the way business park was defined is, we said essentially anything that's allowed within the applicable zoning district. So if the business park is allowed in the LIO and the RO, you're allowed the same uses, which could very well be more like a business park. but this is more expansive. But it does include the concept of a business park. And so I'm wondering, do we need, in fact, the business park or not? Or should we differentiate the two by one being a business park and the other one being more of a shopping center and calling it a shopping center?
Can you refresh
Well-
where these were approved for?
Sure. Let me open up the table.
And Bonnie, wasn't the business part something that we said something like like eco-friendly business park or something like that, where it was like, I thought that was something that was involved with the business park. That was
More sustainable?
sustainable, yeah.
We had a green business park definition,
That
Yeah.
was in the
Was put
tourism
into the-
business.
which was put into the zoning to find a way to sneak a business park into the
Tourism business.
in the tourism business district. And at the meeting we were discussing that, we kind of all figured that we didn't really want that in the tourism business district.
That's what I remember, yeah.
So we took that out. But the idea of having a business park would make sense in, our research office or LIO perhaps. So that's why we kept it in there as a possibility.
Right. So you'll see here, actually, let me go to the LIO, which is at the end here. And zoom in. And so you could see we have business park, but we also have multiple use non-residential. And then you can see the various other uses that are allowed, which through this process became more expansive than the original draft, because I think you wanted more flexibility to some of these remaining non-residential zones. In the RO zone, you have, again, business park, multiple use non-residential development. You'll see multiple use non-residential development really across most of the uses, because it was allowing more than one type of business or building on an individual property. So here in tourism business, we did say multiple use non-residential development, so long as it's, again, allowed and otherwise within the zoning district.
So I'm looking at the map, the LIO, the only LIO I believe we have is the parcel on Long Meadow Road and Warwick Brook Road intersection that I'm not even clear, is that town property now, or is that still part of Tuxedo Farms?
That is currently Tuxedo Farms. There's been some discussion, or there was some discussion for the last round of stuff we had from Andrew, was the possibility of gifting that to the town. But as of now, it's not ours.
So are we making a decision for the related property right now, which is Tuxedo Farms? If it went to the town could do whatever they want with it later, so. I'm not
Right.
sure. I'm
So
not
it's
sure
really-
why I'm spending a lot of time on that one.
It's really about that property and what might be allowed.
Okay,
It's a good enough sized property that, at least in terms of the build out, I think the build out talked about 200,000 square feet. So it could be done. I think there might be some redundancy between the business park and the multiple uses. And I'm just wondering if we should somehow marry them or not.
Well, I think, first of all, again, we're talking about one parcel, right? That its ownership is in question. If anything, it's leaning towards going towards the town. And
Yeah,
I'm
it's also,
not seeing a rationale as to why that has to be decided now.
yeah, it's the RO and the LIO.
I think we can leave them as separate definitions. I think that
yeah.
it will,
They're slightly different.
yeah, when people decide they want to do one or the other, they'll pick the one that is most favorable to what their plan is, and then the planning board will sort it out.
Okay.
But I don't see anything in either of them that's offensive or, troubling.
Okay.
I agree. I mean, the business park is more offices, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's how you traditionally think of them. multiple uses was just trying to be flexible. And again, also cover the potential for a shopping center in areas that have, retail and allow retail. So we'll let it lie then.
I mean, in the multiple use non-residential, and number one, I'm comforted by the unified architectural treatment and some kind of identifiable theme. Although establishing what those are is a whole nother can of worms, but okay.
Yeah, that would be subject to the planning board review. But when it does come in, they would know that that's part of the definition and that there has to be some uniformity so it doesn't look like a hodgepodge. And again, you typically see that, especially in a shopping center. You don't want to see 15 different sign facades. You want some uniformity like you have at, for instance, Tuxedo.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
So the excerpt here is, so we're talking about the special use permit regulations. And there was a discussion about, I understand, the concept of allowing recreational vehicles and sort of camps as part of a resort lodge. And I think the first question is, would the town board entertain this type of use just as an RV type park? Or do you want it attached to something that otherwise is being allowed in the zone, such as a resort lodge? Because, and I didn't specifically include it as part of a hotel. I included it as part of the resort lodge because the resort typically has other activities going on. We're requiring recreation. And it seems to me the RV would marry better to a resort lodge. But, I think the question is, do you want to allow these? And it'll then be allowed wherever resort lodges are allowed. And because it's accessory, it means that someone who wants to do an RV park still has to do the resort part. It can't just be a standalone RV park. And so the question is, what is everybody's preferences? If you want it at all.
Well, it's in the tourism business, correct? Only in tourism business?
No,
Well, that's the other thing we have to discuss, because it was also discussed when we went through the process of being in, I believe, the Hamlet, the Southfields Hamlet business was another location. And I believe the GB is another location.
right.
I don't think we were allowing it in the TTC. So I think those were the uses or the zones. Let me just check. Also the conservation zone up by Arden. Not in your primary residential districts, for sure. Your TTC, you didn't have it in the NB. You did have it in the GB. You do have it in the tourism business. That's actually where it was first allowed. Not in the RO and not in the LIO. So it's important because if we do allow hotels in Southfields also, but resort lodges were intended to be kind of open space oriented, low density, nice big parcels like, we contemplated, or the town contemplated for the tourism business, which includes the Ren Fair property. The underlying requirements in terms of how many, guest units, et cetera, that you can get for a resort lodge works much better when you have a big piece of property than when you have a small property. The scales are different.
Right. And this addition that you've put in is definitely, if I have a resort lodge, someone can bring their own hotel room with them instead of staying in my hotel.
Yeah,
But there is
But it's-
definitely going to be a hotel type structure here in
A
order
resort
to,
structure, right?
I mean, right? I mean,
Yes.
so,
So I think number one is if we're continuing to allow these in all the zones, including Southfield's Hamlet business, this requirement of 25 acres and then a guest sleeping room for every 10,000 square feet of lot area thereafter is not going to work.
yeah,
You know, and if that's where you see, let's say like a glamping type use, then either we pull that out as a separate use. And I guess the question exists whether a resort lodge really, given the intent of the resort lodge to be, again, low density, maybe horseback trails, other activities, can it actually fit within the SHB? And would you rather allow kind of almost a standalone RV for the SHB, recreational vehicle area, as a separate use, allow it accessory still to a resort lodge, but have it as a separate use also for a place like Southfields, if you wanted to entertain it there, with its own standards and still require some buildings as opposed to just having people park on a lot, so that you're getting some added value to having the use there.
That,
Like
what
say-
you're describing, Bonnie, is what I was thinking. And, you know, if you're just looking at number 8 without going down all the letters through K or beyond, let me see, actually through R. I mean, when you go through all of those, you see, wow, there's a lot more involved here than if you just were reading number 8. You probably don't get a good sense of everything that's required in order to make this approvable.
Yeah, I mean, it's all intended to ensure that you don't end up with, you know, basically full-time, you know, a residence
Can we
living
go
in
through
rec
some of these
vehicles.
letters so that we can actually respond? Because I think if we're just focusing on the bottom of page 138, it really doesn't give you a clear
yeah,
Sure.
to make a decision. So like, for example, like letter A, the area shall be offered on a transient basis. Sites are rented on a daily or weekly basis or otherwise permitted by the owner to be used for camping on a temporary short-term basis. That's one of the protections you were just mentioning.
Right. Individual plots where recreational vehicle or tent is allowed shall be separated from buildings by a minimum distance of 100 feet. Vehicle or tent platforms shall be located closer than, no recreational vehicle or tent shall be located closer than 50 feet to a street right of way. And then each vehicle or tent would have a dedicated area to accommodate same of 300 square feet. So, you know, if you have an RV park there, if you have a tent there, you're trying to get some spacing so they're not all packed in. No less than one off-street parking space shall be provided on each lot in addition to the site area provided on each lot for placement of the recreational vehicle or tent. And that means when they say lot, and I think that needs to be clarified, that's the off-street parking space for the tent, for the RV vehicle. Many of them bring cars with them, you know, and if you're tenting, you're definitely coming in a car. But that's something that the planning board, you know, would ultimately review.
yeah. I
I'll-
put in the chat a site that someone in town shared with me called www.tent.trr, and it's
Tenter.
you know, it has like, it's really interesting how they, you know, how they're advertising, or you know, Harriman is one of the areas that they are advertising in New York for like tents and small like glamping kind of thing.
So like everything, sometimes these are managed fantastic, and then sometimes they become a nightmare. So
Yeah, right.
I have a community, you know, so let's see here. There are many people who are actually renting out their backyards and, you know, larger lots. And they're putting up a tent and they're saying you can hang out. It's, I think, very common in rural areas where this is happening, where people are literally renting out. If they have 10 acres, they're renting out a certain area to make extra income, and let people camp up there. But yeah, these are, I mean, you could see here examples of where people are registered for these tenter sites. And we just reviewed one recently in the town of Shongum, where it's someone's farm property with some homes. They have a back area, they're on hundreds of acres, and they're putting up 2 because that's all they want to deal with. Same town, I have another property owner who basically is letting everybody and anybody there. People are walking up and down the roads, and they have no actually facilities for them.
Well, let me just say that
Sanitary
would not be
facilities.
anything I would be in favor of. I mean, I'm looking at letter J that mentions sanitary facilities, including toilets and showers, shall be provided in separate buildings located in the resort lodge. So,
Right.
you know, that eliminates these casual gypsy
Yeah.
tent camps, you know, which to me is no way what. That doesn't say glamping to me, especially, you know, it's one thing if it's out in the forest here, something really rural, but right on Route 17, I don't think that's what we're thinking about.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I don't know that, other than where you allow resort, so I guess think about where you allow resort lodges. I think if you're in the tourism business district, because you're really talking about the Ren Fair property, there's a lot of land there to accommodate it.
Yeah.
The GB district is the other. You have some pretty big parcels. You know, we talked about 10 acres, et cetera. Hickory Hollow, in theory, you know, would be one of them. Could they accommodate maybe a resort lodge? They could, but then we have to change some of the standards, as it relates to the density of how we determine guest sleeping rooms. Southfield's Hamlet Business, I see that more as a hotel than I see a resort lodge going in there. And,
Yeah.
and my recommendation would be to take resort lodge out of Southfield's Hamlet Business, only because it's too small an area to accommodate a big resort. It can accommodate a hotel, which can have amenities.
Yeah, I agree, Bonnie.
Are you guys good with that?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of items in here from A to R that I would need to go through line by line. I think we're just trying to go through this too quick, if that's what.
Okay, well, let's continue through then.
Yeah, please.
So let's go back up here.
First, even with B, this notion of a tent, that didn't sound like the rest of this RV.
I was calling it an RV. So I think fundamentally, is it okay to have tenting, or were you looking more for an RV situation?
Me personally, I thought we were talking about RV, and where that has its own, like Jay said, you know, you're basically providing yourself with your room.
So not that someone's coming along and popping up a tent.
No, not anywhere I'm imagining.
Well, maybe you
would-
could have a smaller area, you know, percentage wise allowed for platform tents, maybe.
Where are we
But, you know-
talking about? How about naming a location? Because I'm not imagining where this is happening.
I mean, aren't we talking about Southfield?
No, right now we're thinking of maybe not even having resorts in Southfields just because of the size of the properties. But if we don't include Southfields, you're left with GB district and the tourism business district.
Right.
So properties, go ahead.
No, finish, please. Sorry.
So, but there is an alternative, again, if you want to regulate RVs, instead of calling it something that's accessory to a resort lodge, if you wanted to allow it in Southfields, we would actually call it like an RV park and make it a principal use. But again, subject to certain design standards and setbacks, and let someone figure out how many RVs they could get. I just don't know if that's what you want in those
And
areas.
I think that's the question. Right now, we've sort of tacked this on as
An
know,
art resort lodge.
right, an extra accommodation option for a resort lodge. But maybe what we're talking about really is a you know, a fancy campground essentially, which could be RVs. It could be some very nice site set up for people who want to show up with their tent. When I was younger, I don't know if it's still there, we went camping in Disney World, and they had a very nice campground set up where you could go in with your tent, and it was almost like staying at home. Or this could also include, you know, yurts or teepees or some other kind of essentially permanent tents or semi-permanent tents that the proprietor is providing. So again, it's more like a hotel with funny walls. And that would certainly be smaller and would certainly fit in, or could fit in, some of the larger sites in Southfields or some of the other locations. And then we just want to make sure that there was some kind of central building that housed the bathrooms and the office and you know, perhaps a small restaurant or something like that.
Commissary or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And the idea would be
Or
basically
convenience.
it's like a hotel, but a lot of people prefer, you know, especially if they're out on a trip and are planning to camp or be in their RV, they don't want to spend money for a hotel because they already have all that stuff.
So I could see you doing, again, if you wanted to allow it in a Southfields type place, then we set up we can still have the RVs that are accessory to a resort lodge. I think you can leave that in, but you have to create a standalone use that can be a principal use within whatever zones you might want to allow it, including Southfields.
So I'm still trying to go down, in letter B, the thing that kind of put a question mark next to me with this notice of a notion of a tent as opposed to an RV. And unless you go through all of them, I'm not sure it really answers all the questions. But I also had the notion, like Jay was describing, of a location that has a more permanent tent, and we're not looking for every new person that comes in there throws up every different kind of tent. There's locations that have pre-assembled, you called yurt or different types teepees, and at least it has some kind of a standard look to it, and it's not this ramshackle type of conglomeration. So, I mean, first of all, I just want to try to get through these letters, and so the only thing that's really bugging me about letter B is the word tent. But if it was something that was a permanent tent installed by the proprietor, that might be more palatable, at least to me.
So that there's some uniformity.
Yes.
Okay.
Can we go down to letter C, unless anybody else has another point about B?
I think C, we talked about, which is you have to have a parking space for an RV spot or for a tent spot. You know, someone has to park their vehicles next to where they are.
I don't see any controversy with that one.
D, all driveways shall be cleared, grade improved to a 12-foot width for one-way traffic, 20-foot width for two-way traffic, improved to year-round passable condition. Includes periodic speed bumps on each major tangent section to reduce speed. I mean, we could play with the language there, but
Yeah,
basically,
I would not over specify. I would just say it has to include, you know, traffic calming measures, something like that. Let's give people the opportunity to do something interesting as opposed to just
says, okay. And that's really to control speed, especially in an area with a campground, RV, you know, people are walking around back and forth to the tent. You want some speed control.
Yep.
No
Understood.
individual on-site sewage or water supply shall be permitted, and all community systems for the common use of campground occupants, whatever we call this, campground RV, shall fully comply as evidenced by approved plans with standards imposed by the Orange County Department of Health.
So that letter E seems to, the intention there is, it seems to be no chance for permanence, that you're not hooking up to an individual sewage system. You have to offload. I've never had an RV, but there's some kind of offloading that doesn't, right? It's not an individual sewer hookup.
Yeah, well, it's especially that you have any kind of wastewater because, and it's going to depend on, if you recall, in this example, we said that baths, toilets, etc., were going to be in the resort lodge. So there would be a centralized, utility that's handling potable water, and wastewater. Here, if we have RVs on a site that doesn't have a resort lodge, you're still going to need sewer and water if you want a centralized building with bath, toilets for the campers as opposed to the RVs. I'm not sure because I don't have an RV. Do they hook up the wastewater to does anybody know, to the septic system?
No,
No.
I don't believe so.
I've
No.
done it. I've done it several times, and yes, you connect to sewer and water, unless you're really backcountry, and then of course they don't have that. But any RV park of the type you're talking about would have sewer and water hookup.
For each lot, for each campsite?
Correct.
But do they also do some of the vehicles? Can they have like holding tanks where the keys?
They all
is, or-
have holding tanks.
They all have holding tanks, but when you're driving around and then you get to where you're parking for the night, you want to hook up and
unload.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, some of them might have like a dump station, but those are the lesser quality RV parks.
So then they have individual connections
You pull in
to
and
a
there's
centralized system.
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I know. Okay.
Okay.
So, all right. So I think we can understand all this and then decide if this is what you want based on what can be involved.
So I think we're on letter F.
Yep. So this was just something I threw out. No less than 20% of the gross site area of the RV area shall be set aside and developed as common use areas for open and closed recreational facilities, so that you had some recreation built into the RV area. G, no parking, loading, maneuvering, incidental parking, loading shall be permitted in connection with the RV area on any public street, sidewalk, required buffer right of way, or any public grounds. So, clearly it has to be self-contained. They're not going to be parking on 17 or parking on, a county road. They have to be all self-contained. This is reinforcing the transient camping purposes. No improvements, living units designed for permanent occupancy. All vehicles have to be maintained in a transportable condition. They can't remove the wheels. They can't attach the vehicle to the ground. Again, that's to avoid permanency. It's to ensure that these are transient. Camping spaces shall be rented out day, week, season.
I'm not comfortable or maybe leased or purchased.
Okay.
That seems to eliminate the transient nature of what you're trying to get there.
So I think sometimes if you go upstate, there are some campgrounds that people regularly go to and they will lease areas. You're right. If you're leasing, if you're purchasing, they're going to have like a regular group of people that are going to be at that park, and it's less transient. And it's almost more like just a compound. So.
I would want that deleted.
Okay.
I mean, it is common in most RV parks, but it does limit how many spaces are available for people who are traveling and don't want to lease.
Yeah, and I think
if people want to live in Tuxedo full time, they can buy a house.
Yeah.
Well, most of the places I've been to where that happens, it's really just a seasonal.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, but so they may,
it can be rented by the season, and that does happen in a lot of RV parks.
Well, it says it can't be rented by the day, the week, or the season. It's the, or
Right.
may be leased or purchased that I'm having an issue with.
Well, I'm
Right.
saying
That
that
right
does
there.
happen. That does happen. It's a common thing that. But maybe what you could do is limit how many spaces can be leased.
You
Is
could,
it-
but I'm lobbying for the removal of that. That's what I'm trying to be clear about.
Okay, I'm just from my
That's just to rent.
experience. My experience, having done this 3 times around the country, is that it is a common thing.
now, let me ask you this, Michelle. Do you find that the more upscale RV type locations, campground type locations, do they have ownership or leases or not necessarily?
Well, there's in many of the parks that I've been to, there have been sections where they're definitely leased. People leave there. I mean, it's unbelievable what can happen in some of these places with the outdoor cooking. I mean, you would think you were in somebody's wonderful house with the outdoor grills and things that they leave, which uh, maybe we don't want to go that far, but it kind of goes the full gamut.
Okay.
But I think we're basically talking about the Red Apple Rest and Tuxedo Auto Body, correct?
If we're talking about Southfields, yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, then we're talking about Southfields, at least I am.
Yeah,
So-
but we're also talking
But
about
we're
being
also
able to
talking
do this
about-
in other locations. This is no
Right,
reason
as
why this couldn't
accessory.
happen in tourism business.
Right, we said right now, we wrote it up that it's accessory to a resort lodge. So we anticipated that if tourism business, the GB are allowed a resort lodge, that they could have some RVing, and we actually said what the percentage could be so that you have the resort part of the overall use. But because of the reality that in Southfields, you're unlikely to build a full resort on that small property, it might be something you want to allow on
Right,
its
and that's what
own.
I'm trying to focus on with the reality. You know, if you can't imagine something up in the Adirondacks, we don't have that. You know, I think we could easily list on one hand what properties you're imagining this on. I don't imagine this on the Hickory Hollow property. I think we were trying to come up with some useful for some very specific spots. I'm not sure why that's a challenge.
Well, can't you carve out a piece of that giant parking lot up by the Ren Fair and do this there?
Possibly as an accessory to a
Why?
resort.
Why not do it as a standalone? I want to spend the weekend at the Ren Fair.
A season.
What if I want to spend the weekend and I don't need a whole resort because I'm going to the Ren Fair for 2 days?
Yeah, that's part of the decision making.
Well, that's the question.
Accessory
I
and
think that we're
principal.
trying to craft something that can happen possibly in a number of places. I mean, if we're only crafting something for the Red Apple Rest, then let's just get the proposal from the guy who wants to do it and approve it.
Right. Yeah, I could see it in Southfields and tourism business.
A standalone?
Yeah. Because maybe a resort lodge wouldn't want it, but somebody else might want to do it. Gives options to people.
You know,
What about the GB?
I think it would need a lot more specific definition, you know, because now we're really lowering the bar to the amount of investment that would be needed. And, you know, I think one of the protections that we would have had in the quality was built around the notion of a resort lodge.
Okay, but the site that you're specifically talking about putting it on isn't large enough for a resort lodge.
Right, and I thought it was mentioned earlier, were we discussing this notion of an RV, a glamorous RV park as being something more of a standalone? I think
Right.
that was mentioned several times earlier.
Absolutely, and it could be. And if it's a good idea to be a standalone in Southfields, why isn't it a good idea to be a standalone elsewhere in town if there's sufficient space for it?
Well, because I think, then you might have a mega RV park and now you've lost, the one property that we have that can facilitate a resort lodge is the Ren Fair site because I believe it's 300 acres, something along those lines. And that's what I think the difference is. Whereas if you tried to make the resort lodge a necessity and only have this as an accessory, yeah, that knocks the Red Apple Tuxedo auto bodies. But I think together there, we're talking what, 9, 12 acres tops? I don't even remember what it was.
Not a lot.
So then why don't we put a top end acreage on it? If you're worried about, the entire airfield being turned into an RV park, then we could put a top number on how big an area could be carved out to do this.
Well, I think that's what the accessory to the resort did, but maybe I missed it.
Well,
No, that is what was intended because I said
that is what that does,
25%.
but what if I don't want to build a resort lodge or can't afford to build a resort lodge or can't afford to build a resort lodge yet? But I can put in a nice RV park.
That addresses a major concern, absolutely. I mean, because the resort, one of the things that I understand differentiates a resort from a hotel is what the recreation is that goes along with that resort.
Right. There's a lot of open space. It's a planned resort as opposed to just a standalone hotel. It's more than just a hotel. Because
Well,
of the
Red
other
Fair
amenities
site
that are
is in the
required.
middle of Sterling Forest, and look, anybody who goes over there, you know what's surrounding it, and I could probably imagine what the resort could build off of that environment.
The other area it's allowed is the GB. So as we're talking about this, you need to think about that. Standalone, not at all, because GB does allow resort lodge.
Yeah, that's based on what we said, but now we're really talking much more in depth rather than just throwing a dart at the map, where we're going to allow this stuff. Now we're looking at, well, what are we actually allowing? Because I think that would change where we're saying it's allowable. We went through a very rudimentary exercise of would we allow this use in this area? And now we're getting much more specific about what these uses will look like. And, I don't want to rush through this just for the sake of, saying, yeah, we did it.
Well, so then perhaps this is a sufficiently large addition that it really goes in the same category as Airbnbs and solar fields and all these other items that we've decided are good things to be the first round of revisions, but we want to put them aside so we can get the major part of the zoning finished.
I tend to agree with that.
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, my one problem, as much as, okay, so it's just under 7 acres. That whole site. I mean, you've got Route 17 on one side and the railroad on the other, and no trees to speak of. So I'm not sure it fits the definition of glamping. And whereas if we limit the size or the number of vehicles or the number of spaces to camp in the tourism business, then you could have something that would really be a glamping.
Yeah, I mean,
business.
if I would use the word glamping, I don't consider RV park a glamping environment. Glamping to me is camping out in the forest with, basically they're providing tents and, it's a catered environment. So I don't know if those RV park and glamping, I don't think we can look that up in the dictionary with a clear definition. I think everybody has in their mind what they think glamping is.
Yeah, glamping is marketing. Glamping is high end, but you can't necessarily, I mean, you could put some requirements in and some standards, but you could just end up with a plain vanilla camping site. It doesn't have to necessarily be glamorous. I think that's where it comes from. Glamorous camping, glamping.
Yeah.
So, unless you're going to have certain standards or require certain things, which may not even be related to zoning, you could just end up with a campground. The more you require them to provide, if it's centralized water, centralized sewer, if you do require a restaurant, if you do require a little store, then you're more likely you're having someone having to invest in a site so that it may be more of a glamping experience than a camping experience. So,
I mean, when I think of the 7 acres that you have highlighted there, look at where it's located. It's between Route 17, the train line, and adjacent to the thruway. I mean, I can see that as attractive to people in RVs that, have some substantial walls and noise proofing. You're not just in a tent. And so, that seemed like a reasonable possibility for that space that actually upgrades it rather than an auto body shop and a dilapidated restaurant. That's what I heard an idea hatched about, and would that be a possibility? An upscale RV park. That's what I heard discussed.
I mean, that's something you could allow and don't even introduce camping. You create a use for RVs. And I think the question is, do you want to insert that now into the law, or do you want to, tackle this? Do you want to tackle it now, or do you want to take this up when you deal with short-term rentals and other types of tourist-related uses?
Well, I'm seeing it's 7:47, and we're trying to get to the end of this process. We had these discussions previously. This seems to move us further and further away from the finish line when we start adding these things. And I'm not sure how necessary it is. But
well, I think it's town policy. When we were talking about Hickory Hollow, it evolved so that we introduced the MU zoning district. And if you think that there are a couple of uses you could accommodate, and again, we don't know how intricate or involved it is until we actually start talking about it. But if it seems to be requiring a lot of investment of time, where you really want to just get to a finish line at this point, I think that's part of your decision making as to whether to tackle it right now. I mean, if you knew for sure, the majority of you said, "Hey, let's allow RV parks in SHB." That's something we can add and put some standards together. But if you want a broader discussion about other zones, other locations, it just takes time to talk about these things.
I think if we're not talking about bed and breakfasts, because people are worried about them becoming boarding houses, we should not just be slapping RV parks willy-nilly into town because they become trailer parks in a heartbeat.
Yes, I agree with that. Totally.
And I think that I would put a pin in this. Let's get the zoning finished, and we can pick this up as part of amendments or something else.
I agree
agree.
with that. So we're unanimous.
Okay. So we're going to skip over this.
But I will
But-
say, Bonnie, I know you spent a bunch of time putting this together, and I thank you for doing that so that we could really examine the ramifications
Concept.
of this really simple idea, right? So,
And you can take it up afterwards, and you've started to think it through, and you're just that much further along when you do decide to tackle it. So
Well, I think what also could be useful, maybe not, but you know, that the work has been put in here. If people are contemplating these ideas, we could at least share what the thoughts of how they've been developing. So somebody, you know, can benefit from, oh, these are the kind of things they were considering. You know, if they're trying to propose some of these ideas, okay, these are the things that, and this is why it's a complex consideration that they're not going to just slap it up, you know. So if you're coming before a board, the town board first, I would imagine that you show you've considered some of these things and to make and present what you're hoping we would approve.
And I think also the fact is that now that you've had a discussion of it, there's an openness by this board to consider it as at a later time. You're not saying no way, we don't want this. You're saying it looks like we could accommodate it. We just need to be specific as to how to accommodate it and where to accommodate it.
I think, and especially the last part, the where, you know, because it's not like we have an infinite list of properties. And I personally, you know, when you're just trying to make decisions, it's in all of these different zonings, you know, we know there are specific properties that lend themselves differently. And that's how I feel about it. But I think we've unanimously said to move forward, though. That's one definitive thing.
Okay. So now we have to get to hotels, which is something that you have wanted to allow. And you really didn't have standards for hotels. And so I inserted some special use permit standards proposed to start the discussion and determine what you do want to include and what you don't want to include. So this is the beginning of that section. It's at the end of the special use permit section. And
I'll be happy to start the read aloud if you like.
yeah, I'm just gonna zoom in here. So people can see that. Let me just get to, because I think this is something we do have to add since we allow the hotels and that's not a question. So why don't you start while I'm maneuvering within my zoning document too.
Okay, DD, hotels subject to the following. Use of a hotel site and any buildings or structures thereon shall be limited to the usual hotel activities as defined herein, and accessory uses incidental to the operation of a hotel and of the same general character, including but not necessarily limited to the following, provided that all accessory uses shall be planned as an integral part of the hotel and located on the same site therewith. Number 2, accessory uses. All space dedicated to accessory uses, including dining rooms, swimming pools, and recreational areas, whether indoors or outdoors, or a combination thereof, shall not occupy more than 30% of the total gross floor area of the hotel. The following accessory uses are permitted, subject to the approval of the planning board. I want to pause there for a second. What's the thought behind the magic number of 30%?
There's no real magic to it. It was just a way of defining what remains accessory. And if you wanted to allow more, you could, but it's just to ensure that the accessory unit uses are not more than the area dedicated to the guest sleeping rooms. And I would add, as we're going through this, that I would not include as part of the 30% parking. I think it's 30% of the building area.
Well, what if they wanted to have wedding facilities? Would that?
They could.
In addition to the swimming pools and the other recreation facilities, it seems that 30% might be restrictive.
Well, we can raise the number. You're talking about like having a big catering hall kind of arrangement?
Well, I mean, not
What-
a catering hall, as the principal use, but, it seems like a lot of hotels have, uh, wedding facilities, conference facilities. And if it's limited to 30%, then it almost seems that it would be a small hotel. I don't know.
Well, so that's part of this discussion, and I'm skipping ahead, but I think you need to determine whether in any individual hotel you want to put a restriction on the total number of guest rooms.
Okay, so
Because-
say you wanted to have a conference facility and a wedding facility, and you wanted that to be only 30% of the hotel. The hotel might, I'm not sure, but I'd have to calculate it out. It might have to be a 4 or 5 story hotel in order for a sufficiently sized conference facility and wedding facility to be only 30%. I mean, say
Right.
you had a
I mean,
2-story hotel.
we could certainly raise the number from 30%. I mean,
Right.
that's the first bid, if you will.
Right.
But I think we need to take a step back. The real question is, when everyone is thinking about a hotel in Tuxedo, what are they thinking about, right? Are you thinking about something relatively small, does it fit into Tuxedo Square if you could make the elevators work properly? Or am I taking one of those big buildings like, and reconfiguring the International Paper facility into a big hotel with conference rooms and a wedding chapel? I'm still getting a little nervous about what you mean by wedding facilities, but I grew up in a different part of town than you did. So,
I
You
don't
know,
just a big banquet room,
you know,
right?
Like-
I mean, is it
Well-
like big enough to accommodate what, I don't even know what a typical wedding is these days.
So-
Some
so if
between
you're in-
150 and 250 people,
a
250
lot of my
people.
clients, it's
Yeah,
like
if you-
1,000 people.
If you go to, let's say, a Park Ridge Marriott, a Park Ridge Marriott may have space for a wedding. The place that's right here by me off of 59, when you come off of the thruway interchange, the hotel that's right there, that
Yeah.
has that has weddings there. So it's not uncommon to have weddings in a hotel. It's just how much you dedicating, and because, in looking at where you allow them anywhere between the TTC zone, right? All the way up to the TB zone. So, what you could put on a little parcel in the TT zone scale wise is going to be very different from what you might allow in the TTZ, within the TB, which could be hundreds of acres. And so that's partly why I, just to throw out again for discussion, put a cap of 200 guest rooms in there. Because we're talking about a hotel, your typical, let's say Hampton Inn style type place is going to be about 120 often. So 200 is getting big, and also in the back of my mind, obviously people started to react to the casinos that were proposed. If we're talking about TB, when it was 400, people were like, possibly, and then it became 800, and people started to be uncomfortable with that, and then it went up to like 12 or 1400, and everybody said no, and obviously that came with a lot of other activities with it, but I think there's also just a basic question: what is a reasonable size for a hotel? And given some of the acreage, if someone said, okay, I want to build a 500 unit hotel, is that going to be okay?
Well, do we have a height restriction?
We do. We have,
So that would limit how many rooms, given the size of the available sites in the GB.
But it could be, I think the TB is the one, from my perspective, if we're talking mega, is the one that you have to focus on. Because they could use all of the Ren Fair property. And it's a hotel could be a building or buildings. If it's one building, it's one thing, but you know, the maximum building height, which we established as 3 stories, 40 feet, is not going to, on, you know, a Ren Fair site, be limiting.
Right.
So there are in some of our communities, especially where they have larger parcels where these can be applied, they have in instances said no more than X guest units, because beyond that, the scale they feel is out of character. Now, you know, if someone said, I want to put a Mohawk house in there, you might be okay with it, but then they would get a variance, you know, from
Right.
the ZBA. That's why they're there.
Yep.
So I think you need to consider maybe putting a max on at where you would be comfortable of anybody coming in proposing something. And then if it's something that is a real amenity, you know, then you might allow them to do a variance. And I would just note that these special use permits, you can vary the requirements. So there is some waiver capability by the planning board unless you explicitly say you can't waive this. And this might be an area where you might want them to go for a variance as opposed to just being waived by the planning board. So I think about 200, you know,
Okay.
again, sometimes it's just think about places you've been, think about the size of locations. You know, if we can do some research on Mohawk, if you want to get a sense of how many guest rooms are there, but I think kind of about where you've been and scale. And if you think that's reasonable, then we could look at how many guest rooms are in it. So if you went somewhere in particular and you said, I could see that on the Ren Fair site, you know, and we know it's 300, then we could like set the cap around there.
But we would be keeping the 3-story limit.
Yes.
Okay.
And if they wanted to go taller in that instance, because it's in the bulk requirements, that's a variance situation. So let's kind of put a hold on the accessory right now as far as the amount of space. Let's kind of go
Okay.
through some of the other requirements and then we can come revisit it.
So it
So-
makes sense to just keep it at 30% and then people come for variance, is what you're saying. So I'm okay
Well,
with.
wherever we specifically say they need a variance, they will. I
Okay.
think on the guest units, they should get a variance. 30%, if you want to give that flexibility to the planning board, you can do that.
Okay.
Well, when I see the 30% and it says whether indoors or outdoors, you know, I mean, if we're considering gardens and potential for an outdoor wedding, those kind of things, I think Michelle was alluding to. I mean,
Maybe talk about
more
indoor.
gardens doesn't sound threatening, you know,
Right.
and so I don't know. Like you mentioned, not counting parking. I'm not sure if landscaping and gardens would be, you know, something you wouldn't want to encourage.
Yeah, I don't know that that'd be an accessory use, but
Okay.
but I think outdoors, I don't know that you're as concerned about the outdoors as you are with the indoors, the total
Right.
amount of.
I
Building
wasn't.
area.
I was just kind of curious as to, you know, the outdoors seem
Yeah.
to be just married to the indoors as if they were equal.
So I'll add some language about not including landscape areas and mostly related to building area.
In my mind, anyway.
And parking lot, is that, we should,
We're going to exclude that. Parking lots tend to be a lot of area, and so your 30% frankly could get open, you know, be consumed by the parking, so we'll exclude that. And so some of the examples that are permitted include caretaker residence. So I didn't know if it was okay to have an accessory dwelling attached to the hotel. Or hotel manager.
I mean, when we're talking about Hampton Inn and that kind of thing, Marriott's, that doesn't seem like that would be a common accessory.
Type. No, they usually have a room
Mm.
somewhere where, especially overnight, they can be.
Yeah, okay.
But is it a full blown, an actual residence would be more, I would say, for possibly a higher end type place, a larger scale place where they
Okay.
have more management of the facility.
Okay.
And it, I mean,
And that's just
obviously
an option.
restaurants.
I mean, they don't have to have it, right? It's just an option.
No, it's an option. Restaurants. And it can serve either the hotel guests exclusively or to the general public. So if you have a hotel, it could be, they may have a restaurant that people can dine there, but it might be just, your Hampton Inn that has breakfast in the morning. So it could be either. Recreational facilities, some examples of the kind of common facilities you see at a hotel. Parking, obviously. And here is office and lobby provision of which shall be mandatory for each hotel. So Jay, to your point, that really doesn't talk about all rooms coming off of a lobby. So I think that we can add to the definition.
Right. I mean, what we're trying to do is do this as what we think of as a hotel, which has got public rooms and and then you funnel through a corridor or corridors. I mean, there may be obviously going to be more than one entrance. There are going to be side entrances and the like, but this isn't, Joe's Real Good Motor Court where you get your key at the office and everybody enters their own room individually.
Right. So I'll add that to the definition. And then retail sales, it's not uncommon to have a little area for buy some toothpaste, get some snacks, etc.
Gift shop. Gift shop.
Yeah. Buy a granola bar for $10. Okay, guest sleeping rooms. In no case are hotel units to be used as apartments for non-transient tenants. As I'm going along.
There's just some grammar in there that needs to be fixed.
Yep. In no case is units to be used.
Units to be
Used. Got that. Just have this guy open, okay? Not that. Hotel sleeping rooms shall not be interconnected by interior doors in groups of more than 2. And that's again to get away from suddenly they're used for other purposes than hotel. Size, each sleeping room shall have an area inclusive of bathroom and closet space of at least 225 square feet. That's just an example, some research that's been done, but it's to ensure that you're not getting a 10 by 10 guest
You're not
unit.
getting what? I'm sorry, I missed that
A
last question.
10 by 10 guest, room, that you're getting something that's bigger than that. Here's where I put the maximum number of guest sleeping rooms for any hotel site inclusive of all buildings shall be 200. I don't know. Again, if you think there's a place that you think scale wise works, especially in the TB, we could establish the threshold there. No kitchen facilities in a guest sleeping room. Each guest sleeping room shall include a full bathroom, including sink, toilet facility, and shower bath installation. Planning board, at its discretion, may allow up to 35% of the guest sleeping room to have a kitchen.
Or is it 35% of the sleeping rooms? Which is it?
Of the guest rooms.
Plural. So you're saying no more than 35% of the guest rooms can have
Yeah.
kitchen.
which may include a sink, stove, refrigerator, and dishwasher as determined by the planning board. And the reason for that is, again, you're not trying to create apartments. But if you had an extended stay, Marriott also, sometimes when you go to tourist destinations, I know I stayed someplace in Fort Lauderdale where they do have kitchens. And that might be okay. So there's a little wiggle room there. There shall
Do you
not be
have
more
a-
than,
I'm sorry, do you have, did we say that the swimming pools would be open to the public? Because I know that is the case at the residence in.
that they are open to the public?
Yes,
Is that okay?
no, I just wanted
Okay.
to,
Okay, so swimming pool, so the amusement and sports facility shall not be open to the general public?
well, how does everybody else feel about that? Well, it says you can't have a membership club, so. So that kind of seems like, outside of the guests. You can't have it.
Where are you reading that?
I'm
Michelle?
talking to myself. Go back up to accessory use C, Bonnie,
Okay,
please. Stop. Recreational facilities, indoor and outdoor amusements and sport facilities for the
Oh,
exclusive
okay.
use of hotel guests.
Got it, thanks.
I don't even remember what I write.
You got it right. You're good.
Yeah, good. Just want to double check, because I'm thinking like a residence inn, or what's the other one? Homewood Suites. They have kitchens and
Well,
dishwashers and all of that.
yeah, I mean, having some rooms with kitchens is actually a nice amenity, especially again, if we're trying to target people who are coming up for the weekend to, do stuff here,
Right.
go hiking or whatnot. I go on a lot of vacations like that, and quite frankly, we don't like to eat out in restaurants every night if we can help it, and certainly not for, it's nice to be able to have a place to make yourself a lunch or, pick up breakfast and not have to eat the crap they have down in the lobby,
Right,
you know.
absolutely.
Yep.
So I
Okay,
think that's a real amenity. And again, we have to make sure that it doesn't become an apartment, but there are other ways to control that besides not having a kitchen.
Agreed.
okay,
I mean, and this is some of the difference, I think, between the resort lodge notion and a hotel. I mean, if it was a true resort lodge with ample amenities, I mean, that could be something that's attractive to Tuxedo residents, that you could use those facilities. And it's not just for the resort guests, that there is some way that a resident could go and appreciate a day at the pool or whatever amenities they may have at these resorts. If there's horseback riding, you could go there if you weren't a hotel guest and that kind of thing. I think that's pretty typical with a resort, though. I mean, a resort golf course, obviously, you don't just have to stay at the hotel to play golf there.
yeah, I mean, you think of, what's that place out in Vernon that they changed, the, Creek?
Oh, yeah, right.
Mountain Creek.
Or Crystal Springs or,
Crystal Springs and Mountain Creek, all of that, Vernon, what used to be Vernon Valley, Great Gorge, the ski center there is a combination of private and public and people being able to use it, even though they also have guests that stay there. So it's kind of the same concept, I think, what Ken's talking about. The next requirement says there shall not be more than one guest sleeping room for every 1,000 square feet of lot area. So I think we need to discuss that. If you have an acre of land, let's say in the hamlet, you could in theory get up to 43 guest units. Again, order of magnitude. So I don't even know that can be accomplished by the time you consider on a smaller lot, height, all the, lobby area, everything else that might be required. So I don't know if 1,000 makes sense, but again, it was to start the discussion. You know, if you took your typical acre of land, you know, given height limitations, whatever, can you really get that many guest sleeping rooms? Should we allow it to be 1,000 and then whatever they can accommodate is what they can accommodate based on the other parameters?
How many square feet is an acre?
43,560.
Yeah, just
So
a bit more than
43.
40,000.
Could you do that in a 3-story building? Let's see. I mean,
It's going to be very
Golf
easy in the
table?
It's very easy in the TB. It's in your smaller zones.
right. You need setbacks, you need parking lots, 3 stories. It seems,
Well, and I think in the like the TTC, we're at 2.5 typically. Hotels, we did go to 3 and 40 feet. So there is a little bit more latitude for a hotel.
Well, I mean, if the minimum room size is 225 square feet and you have 43 of them, that's 9,675 square feet.
okay,
So that's a 3,000 square foot footprint with 3 stories. Now,
3,000?
you got,
Okay.
right? I mean, 9,000
Right,
divided by
right.
3 stories is 3,000 and
Right.
change, call it 3,500.
Okay.
That's doable. You still, you know, you still need to have half again that much for all your amenities and mechanical spaces and all the rest of it. And you got to have parking, etc. So whether it's doable, I don't know, but it doesn't seem like an unreasonable top end limit.
Yeah, I mean, at 200 square feet for a parking space, right? Let's say even if it's half, or if you have 43 units on an acre and you need 43 times 200, and that doesn't take into consideration access aisles and the not.
Right.
That's 8,600. So you could probably, you know, double that for the parking area by the time you lay it out. So, you know, the parking itself could end up being about half of the overall property
On an acre, yeah.
on an acre.
Right. Except that it can't be because what was the maximum coverage you got there?
And everything else. Yeah,
Right. I mean, so it's probably impossible to hit this limit,
50%.
but it's a reasonable place to start.
And then let them just work it all out through the other.
Right. I mean,
Standards.
The room count almost never, I mean, if you think about the unit count, almost never controls how many apartments you get in an apartment building or anything else.
Right.
But because by the time you get done with coverage and parking and all the rest of it, but
Okay.
I mean, you know,
So-
we were thinking about the square footage of the rooms, but then you've got hallways and elevators and stairs and,
right.
I mean, if it's,
But you know, this is, you know, and then if you have all of the Ren Fair site, you know, you're not going to need that many rooms, but. You know.
yeah, I guess
Yeah.
the concern's more about.
This is actually
the
fairly
max-
small.
Yeah, I mean, you're more, if I'm understanding it correctly, you're concerned more about limits for the smaller pieces and the TTC and GB zones. Is that why you're putting this restriction on? Or suggesting this restriction? Okay.
Well, also even in, and honestly, I find this standard because we do some research on the hotel. This doesn't really even make sense in terms of if you're looking at a Hampton Inn, because a parking space is 10 by 20. A parking space is 200 square feet. You're not going to get a room, right? Within a parking space.
Right.
So these are
Well-
almost like minimums from a building code perspective. It's not minimums from what realistically someone's gonna build.
No,
Can you fit a
but
king
in
size bed in
fact,
a
if you-
parking spot?
Well, no, if in fact, because we're actually, we would be requiring more than one parking spot per room. Most of the time, when you start counting required parking spots for retail or anything like this, you wind up with exactly as much parking as you have, occupied space,
Commercial area, yeah.
right?
Yep.
If you have an office, you have a square foot of parking for every square foot of office space. If you have a store, you got a square foot of parking for every square foot of parking of store space. It really is a 1-to-1 ratio when you get done with it.
Except for the fact that we eliminated that 1-to-1 requirement in
Only in existing buildings.
TTC. Right.
No, actually
In
all over the town,
TTC,
but
yeah.
only for existing buildings. So if somebody wanted to put a hotel into Tuxedo Square, maybe, but that would work because people are going to come to stay. They're going to come on a train anyway. But I think we are digressing, as they say.
Well, we're just trying to figure out if that 1,000 makes sense.
I'm going to say that is there anybody here who has another number that they can defend?
I think
All
it's
right,
gonna
let's
sort
leave it
of,
and move on.
Wording again? I'm sorry, I've kind of lost track of how many rooms per 1,000. It's
we
one
were
room?
saying one guest sleeping room for every 1,000 square feet of lot area.
And that just doesn't seem possible in TTC. So.
No, and that's also the benefit of having a cap.
Well,
Yeah,
so in
because-
Tuxedo Town Center, where are we envisioning a hotel anyway? I'm really not really sure about that.
Tuxedo Square. Tuxedo
Okay,
Square.
so Tuxedo Square, I mean, what are we talking about? At maximum, a 10-room hotel?
It was just to establish a standard
I
for a
understand,
boutique hotel.
right.
But no, and it's a
I'm
cap.
just
It's
trying
not
to
a
envision
requirement.
what we're talking about, because obviously if you're talking about the Ren Fair site or Tuxedo Town Square, it's a totally different vision and what, requirements. So it's hard to put that whole spectrum in one paragraph. So I was focused on the 43,560 square feet per acre. And obviously now we're talking about Tuxedo Square. It's an already established building, and forget about the acreage. It's
Right. I mean, exactly. I don't think we have any better number than 1,000, and I think that that's something that the planning board can take under advisement if it comes up.
Okay,
so I guess, when I'm just thinking about an open piece of land, an acre, I can envision what that is, especially with the 43,500, because I know my property is about 3/4 of an acre. Okay. So add a little bit more to that. I pretty much know what an acre looks like. And so with this notion of 1,000 square feet per room, and like you said, that's basically 40 rooms. And that's including parking and everything else, that seems pretty dense, but I don't know if that's what we're trying to imagine, the density of it.
Yes, establishing a density for these and some other standards which would dictate how many guest sleeping rooms you could get. And I think,
Okay, so then I'll just expand on that notion of density. Then I'm thinking, if it was 43 guest rooms with parking and everything from hallways to a possible restaurant and all that, a check-in area, I'd be thinking that's pretty dense. One room per 1,000. But if I'm wrong, explain to me. I'm not trying to be a problem. I'm just trying to get my imagination working so that I'm understanding where the conversation's at.
well, if we think of the Bruno property, and let's say he just wanted to put some guest rooms upstairs,
Yep,
and maybe he put a cafe down on the ground level,
yep,
it doesn't have to be, especially with a small boutique style hotel, it could be 6 guest rooms. You know,
Oh,
it
yeah,
could be,
I understand, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so I think this just allows for that alternative, you know.
You know,
that you
that's
could
somebody
accom-
who's trying to fit something into an existing building and make it work, you know?
Right.
That doesn't sound threatening at all. It's limited by the size of the building, you know? Same thing with Tuxedo Square. Go at it. If you can make something good out of that, I think the building itself and the parking is gonna dictate a lot of that. And like Jay said, more than likely, an accommodation like that is probably gonna work for people getting off the train. And that would
Absolutely.
be actually really nice that there's something for those people.
All right, so let's run it the other way then.
Okay,
So if you have no more than one, if you have one room per 1,000 foot of lot area,
mhm.
and your maximum hotel size is 200 rooms, that is a 200,000 square foot lot, which is roughly
5 acres. 5
5 acres. In
Yeah.
real life, now that's just for the hotel room, so double that to accommodate parking or triple that. That means if you want a 200 room hotel, you need somewhere between 10 and 15 acres of land to build it on.
Okay. And that brings me back to my recurring thought. How many properties do we have that could accommodate that? I know you could buy other properties and put them together. but-
6 maybe
Yeah,
You know.
okay,
that I can think of off the top of my head. But
right.
The question is whether or not we need to come up with a different number than no more than one room per 1,000 square feet of lot area. And I don't think it's a significant restriction one way or another.
I think it becomes important if you didn't have a cap for the larger properties. Because
Okay.
if you have 10 acres and you have, 430,000, right?
Hmm.
And you're dividing by 1,000 square feet, now you're talking about 430 rooms.
Right.
So you could get a very large hotel, and that's only 10 acres. And if we think of Ren Fair and we're talking more like 50 and more, that would be a massive hotel. So that's why I think the upper limit is more important. Not for
I
the
agree.
hotels. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, absolutely.
So, all right. So right now we'll leave those standards as is. And again, we're getting to a draft. We're not getting to the final document if it needs to be adjusted. Dimensional regulations. I had that a building shouldn't exceed
There you go.
300 feet.
Yeah.
And just to put some standard on it, especially for our larger properties, 300 feet is a football field. So, again, you want to envision things. Access and service roads properly related to public streets to avoid unsafe conditions and traffic congestion, no backing up of cars. It's kind of just standard performance standards. Off-street parking, where a hotel includes a restaurant or other eating and drinking facilities open to the public. Required parking space shall be provided for such facilities in addition to the required parking spaces for sleeping rooms and other floor space. And no parking space should be located closer than 25 feet from any hotel building ingress or egress, including emergency egress. And then parking areas need to be at least 25 feet from all property lines. And again, if we're in the hamlet, if this is a problem, this is something that the planning board could waive. Solid waste, there should be a central facility for deliveries, management of solid waste and similar activities. And then there should be no outdoor public address or music system. So those are the standards at this point. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, change.
I want
Go
to
ahead.
go ahead.
Aren't there new state requirements on food recycling for over a certain number of guests or people served at a restaurant? There's a new standard that just went into effect, and maybe that needs to be stated in here.
Would that be a zoning standard or
A building
some kind
code.
of building
This is
code or
some sort of
health code.
code.
And it kind of doesn't matter because we've already said that if there's another agency with jurisdiction and they have a more restrictive requirement, it covers.
Oh, okay.
Right. So I mean, we don't have to spell out every requirement from every agency. The hotel has to meet Board of Health rules for their swimming pool and all the rest of it.
Right.
So
Okay.
Good.
Yeah.
I'll go to mine. No outdoor public address or music system means that in your outdoor wedding grove, you can't have a PA system.
Right.
I think that we already have noise
Nuisance.
ordinances
Right.
and nuisance ordinances. Yes, but those got conflated in my head. So, I don't see why we have this. I mean, or
We could say,
can't leave the
noise,
property kind of thing.
yeah, noise shall not be audible beyond the property limit.
Yeah,
And let them,
something like that.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we're not talking about lighting and all the others that, are not in the zoning code, all of those requirements. So
Still
that's what I'm
apply.
assuming. I don't mean to be rude to anybody. That's what I'm assuming where those kind of things are covered.
yes.
All right, so we've
Anything
come to the
else?
end of this thing. Were there other special use items that, oh, wait, see, there's more. Good.
This was a Howard thing.
Oh, yeah, this is this. Could someone please put this into English question?
Yeah, this
Um,
was because it was including special use permits. And again, there were certain things that, not even Howard, but Don Nichols worked on. He definitely had a rationale for why he would include things. I don't know what it is, so it just needs to be looked at by Howard. Because there may be a reason for this. I don't know what it is myself.
Yeah, severability. It sounds like a legal thing.
Yeah. There were some other changes made, red lines. A lot of it was clarifications, better wording. I shouldn't say a lot of changes, but better wording, clarification, streamlining, grammar. And what I can do is I can provide a red line version of the version that I work on to everybody, just so that you can see specifically what was changed throughout this. Because we had already discussed a lot of the red lines, so I didn't want to keep the red lines in. In general, the MU zone, I did insert into the document, and Howard did go through that language, so just be aware of that. Lighting, I have a question. What's the status of the lighting local law? Has Howard provided it? Are you working on it? Or do I just incorporate here?
Well, it has to be a law, right? Is that
It could
Right,
be-
so-
it could be zoning regulations, which become a law. So we could
right?
make it part of the zoning. The reason we pulled it out is because
The immediacy.
because the immediacy of it, because, based on what we've been hearing from our building official, it's a pressing issue.
Right.
So
Um,
you're treating this, I mean, commonly this is actually in the zoning, and we have lighting standards, but this is a very, very robust lighting section.
That we already have?
Well, this has been drafted. I don't know if you have all even read it.
we
Um,
have, this is, to a certain extent, this is the same, this is similar to what, I mean, we have the law that we got that Howard proposed.
Right. This looks similar, right?
And I know that I made comments on it. I'm not sure if anybody else did. And so far, we haven't seen any revisions based on anybody's comments. So we
So this-
kind of now can do one of two things. And Bonnie, stop me if I'm saying the wrong thing here. We can either basically take what we've been looking at so far as the lighting law and stuff it into the zoning, which is kind of where it belongs, and put it all together as a single package and approve it with the zoning and be done. Or we can hold it out as a separate item and try to work it at the zoning in tandem. And quite frankly, I think it kind of belongs in the zoning. We just put it all together. It's not like we're going to get this done any sooner if we make it separate.
Right.
And quite frankly, it's the summertime when everybody is going to bed before it gets dark anyway. So it's
You
not sure
know,
how pressing it really is.
with the lighting, it seemed like the problems that were raised as the most egregious were the ones that were the least addressed in the law. I mean, there was something about basically about neighbors with floodlights and, you know,
Right.
just even a matter of having them on a motion detector. And, you know, it was mind boggling to me. I can't remember, but I remember looking at, it seemed like that those are the problems that really weren't all that well addressed. I remember in conversation with you, Michelle, that we were
Yeah,
kind of
I
scratching our head.
No,
Yeah,
absolutely, you're absolutely correct.
that
I mean,
was coming
the
back to me,
problems
yeah.
that were articulated were the ones that were the least addressed.
In fact, we said it, yeah, I think we even made that comment, that the law didn't address the purpose of why we were looking at it,
Right.
changing.
So my suggestion would be that we basically take what we have and stick it. I mean, it's currently got zoning code numbers on it.
I was
Put it
going to
back
say
in-
that.
And put it back in the zoning instead of pulling it out as a special. And quite frankly, I do the same thing with the garbage cans and put it all in there and pass it all at once.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Let's
I
go
mean,
back
some
to
of
the
this-
comments we had made and, you know, ask Howard to change it.
Were you all
I
unanimous
remember
in
with
the
the
changes?
lighting, the one thing that seemed to totally not address the concerns was something that, you know, if this lighting was installed, you know, prior, it's still good. You know, so okay, so if you've had that light shining in my bedroom window for the last 10 years, you may continue to do so. You know, that to me is like insane.
Right.
I think it's hard to enforce.
That was one of the comments, and that's one of the corrections she made. I mean, quite frankly, we have those comments. If you guys want to send them again, Bonnie, I can bang this out in a half-hour phone call and then have Howard look at it and be done. I mean, everybody's welcome to join the phone call if they want, but
Well, I think if you just eliminate the grandfather clause, then
Well,
maybe it's
there's-
better.
There's overlap because, you know, for instance, it's talking about canopy lighting within a gas station. That's already part of the standards. You know, that should go in the special use permit standards for a gas station. You know, this should just be reworked to put it in the right sections. This is being handled, like you said, almost as if it was separate from the zoning, and yet it is going in the zoning. And there already is a lighting standards, whole section, chapter for the zoning that covers a lot of this. So I think we just need to include whatever, you know, is new, and that the board wanted. I do wonder, in looking at this, it says recommended outdoor lighting types. If it's recommended, there is no teeth to it.
no. Well, I'm going to also say one of my big comments was this entire table should be excised. Because anytime the town board recommends something specific like this, it is out of date by the time it gets passed.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to add, look, what brought the lighting to our attention was a couple of very specific problems in basically a residential setting, right? I mean, that's what I recall. And, you know, if you're going to look at the entire zoning code for lighting and we still didn't resolve the two problems that brought it to our attention, my thinking would be, hey, if there's going to be a problem with gas station lighting, when that comes before the board, a future board could resolve that, just like we're trying to resolve the 2 residential issues that came to our attention. I don't think we need to try to anticipate every possibility because we'll never get anything done. I just think
Yeah.
those
Bonnie, that's
that
what
were
we
brought
want.
to our attention need to
That's
be resolved.
This is what Bonnie just highlighted is what we were saying doesn't make any sense to include. And maybe if we
Because
just
right off the
write
bat,
that-
they're gonna be exempted, so you're not gonna address the very issues that are an existing problem. This is just saying going
Yeah.
forward when you make changes, and I have to tell you, you can have with residential lighting, a lot of recommendations, but who's, you're not gonna enforce it unless it becomes a problem. I mean, it's gonna be there, it's gonna be standard for every single house. But almost you'll never enforce it except when it's a huge nuisance and there's a
Right.
complaint.
And the issue we have that was brought to our attention by the building official was there are neighbors in some of the closer spaced residential areas that, as he put it, are having light wars. And there is no way and there's currently no way to make them, prevent light trespass or, shield their
Yeah.
fixtures or any of the above. So this.
And is it something that the town even wants to get involved with, or is this a matter between 2 private property owners?
Yeah, but that doesn't involve a gun, I hope, because even the neighbors that I love, it seems as they get older, they want to have floodlights illuminating their driveway basically 24/7, which is ridiculous. And
Right.
so I think there does need to be some type of, at the very least, a time shut off and the notion of a motion detector. I think those are reasonable instances that you can build into a law.
Right, absolutely. And we need to, obviously, this clause needs to be changed to what, within 1 year of the enaction of this statute, blah, blah, blah. And really the question comes down to, are we gonna make it, we're gonna pass this as separately as the lighting law package? Or do we stuff it into the zoning because it's almost there and pass it all at once? And I would vote for the latter.
I vote for the latter because I think there's only a few minor, again, I don't recall anything much larger than this issue. And quite frankly, to me, it doesn't seem that complicated. I think, the notion of floodlights, just the word, I looked it up, what is a floodlight expecting to do? I think you can find definable alternatives that, again, include time of day where there's a cutoff, a motion detector, and lighting that, isn't intended to flood the light onto your neighbor's property. More directional and I forget what the words you were using, Jay, but that focuses the light where it's supposed to be, whether it be ground up, if you're trying to illuminate, what's the purpose of the lighting? Flooding, people who come up from the city that are used to having, street lights outside their bedroom windows. Well, that's not why I moved here. And no, I don't want that. And I think that's a reasonable expectation that people don't install these floodlights and keep them on all night. And that's what I heard was the major problem here. And yeah, it's a problem in my neighborhood too. There's more and more people coming up that are floodlight crazy.
So let's try and integrate this if everybody is okay with that. We'll
Yeah, I
integrate.
mean, we thought it was gonna be, we could accomplish the new lighting law before we got to zoning, but we're almost at the public hearing portion of the zoning process. So
Right.
let's just keep it in the
Yeah,
zone.
I would integrate it. It's going to be, it was intended to be part of the zoning anyway. So, it was just creating a brand new article where you already have a section on lighting. So,
So is there
we'll
anything like what
integrate
I
it.
was describing about, timing and motion detector? I mean, is that so unreasonable? That seems like a common sense fix to me.
Nope, nothing about timing in those words. You said motion detector?
Yeah, I mean, look, what I see happening is, like for my
It's
neighbor, for
here.
example, there's the motion sensor. I kind of remembered that.
But it says it's recommended.
I know. I think the word recommended means we can't. We're not going to make a decision on anything. So let's put the word recommended in there. Because I can recommend. I don't know.
Recommended is not enforceable. It's
Yeah,
not
that's what I'm saying.
enforceable.
We need something enforceable. Otherwise, it's two neighbors battling it out, and nothing's happened. We've done nothing. That's how I feel about that. So take away the recommended. Why do we put recommended in there?
Yeah, a lot of this is recommended. Now you have non-residential properties, all non-essential lighting shall be turned off not later than 1 hour after, and not sooner than 1 hour before normal business hours. So you
Yeah.
have standards for your non-residential properties. I think it's how far do you want to go in terms of limiting light on individual people's properties? And some of it, really depends on if you're in the hamlet and you're on a small lot versus if you're on a 2-acre lot, the potential for really what it is light trespass. That's the
Absolutely.
word.
And
This
that's
should
what we
deal with
need
light
to regulate.
trespass. Yeah,
I mean,
your neighbor's lighting should not be trespassing on your property.
That's it. And there's no disagreement here. Absolutely. And how do we fix it? First of all, the word recommended, I think we could all agree, you might as well strike everything if you're going to put recommended in there, because there's no enforceability. Thanks for your recommendation, see ya.
On the other hand, though, I mean, devil's advocate, do people, I mean, are we the parents of the town? I mean, these people are adults, it's their property.
No,
I'm not saying I hate it if, but yeah.
If your light is infiltrating my house, no, you're trespassing. So that's what we're trying to say. Yes, you need to keep your light on your property.
And then if you
that's
have
the problem.
lighting, it's shielded. It's not a
That's right.
bulb, that of a certain lumen level that is going to be super bright that you're going to be looking at all night.
Trust me,
because
if
it's
the
on.
light's coming in your bedroom window, Maria, you're going to have a problem, and you're going to not want to have to fight with your neighbor over.
Yeah, true.
No, it's definitely true, because I have the problem. Absolutely.
Well, it's also like we have noise ordinances. It's the same
Absolutely,
kind.
yeah. You can't just say, we're going to leave it up to them to figure it out. Wow. Let
No,
me tell you.
there need to be clear and enforceable rules.
Minimums.
So that when there is a complaint, the building official or the police or whoever can go and say, no, this is the law. You have to stop this.
Yeah, I see that.
So 10 o'clock at night, if your light's on a motion detector, first of all, when I did do the research, Jay, and did add, and one of the things I put into my comments to the board was data on the fallacy that lighting somehow prevents crime. That these lights left on all night somehow reduce crime. The statistics show exactly the opposite. You're actually helping the criminal because he can see what's going on and nobody's looking. If the motion detector makes your light go on and oh, wow, something triggered that. Okay, now maybe I should look out my curtain and see what's going on there. That's what the data was showing. So something as simple as setting a time, and then yes, if you did have your light on a motion detector, that would at least shut off no longer than 5 minutes after. you know, then maybe we've moved the needle forward somewhat. And then, you know, some type of shielding without getting too specific. If it's determined that the light is leaking onto your neighbor's property, you know, there needs to be some kind of a corrective action taken.
So how about this? First of all, I apologize if I was making it sound like nobody was doing any work. I haven't seen your comments. But how about that? Why don't Bonnie and I add this to the stereo manual editing program? And if you guys all resend your comments on what we've done so far, Bonnie and I can sort of try to pound this into a round shape, and we'll get it into the draft, and people can look at it and see if we got it right.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and I would keep it as simple as possible to these problems that were identified. You know, I don't see us analyzing every gas station situation, because when that pops up, we will. Yeah,
Yes, and some of those things already exist. And yeah, I think that that's the other thing. If it's not a standalone law, then we don't have to recreate everything. We just have to tweak up the parts that are being an issue.
That would be my recommendation.
Okay, so we'll plan on inserting it. One last thing that Howard had asked you, and I don't know if you got back to him. He was talking about the telecommunication law, and he asked whether facilities like cell towers should be on their own lot and not part of another lot. So if you think of the cell tower at the Red Apple Rest, if you think of the cell tower that's been introduced to the Ren Fair property, they're leasing space on those properties. And he had indicated, he had asked the question, should it be an individual lot on its own property? And you know, the other thing that happens, your existing regulations talk about setbacks, and it says that they, you know, the area, the lease area, the area that's controlled has to be at least the setback, you know, equivalent to the height of the cell tower. So in other words, if you have 100-foot cell tower, you have
And
to
it
have
falls
100,
over.
100, right. And so I could tell you all of the lease areas that are in this town are not 100, whatever, because they always invariable will say, this can't fall over. It's not structurally possible. You know, it's either meant to collapse in or it's meant to topple this way, but it just doesn't happen. And so they're not that large. The other, I think, thing to consider is that if you think of the Ren Fair property, if you create a lot in the town, now it needs bulk requirements and it's supposed to have frontage on a road. Otherwise, you technically need something called a 280A variance because you have a landlocked lot. So, you know, where the Ren Fair was, the cell tower, you either had to automatically get a variance to create a block that's landlocked within their property, or they would have had to bring a huge strip down to get it connected to a road and adhere to all the standards. So I don't know why he asked. I don't know if it's a problem. I don't know if this is something the board discussed. So I don't know if you responded to him and if we need to make changes or not.
Well, I read it, and, you know, what stuck in my mind was the whole topple factor. You know, that's what I took from it. And I didn't know what was triggering it and was trying to read it in a very busy day. And so, again, what I took from it was the topple factor. And it doesn't seem reasonable to me that that's an expectation. I would hope that every site would be evaluated somewhat differently, you know, based on real conditions rather than just trying to look for one standard that fits everything. But, you know, I'm no expert on that. But, you know, it didn't seem possible that every lot, first of all, would have to be a standalone lot, and that your frontage issues that you're talking about, you know, that might make us put cell towers in places that make the whole town look ugly, rather than trying to find a space that's tucked out of the way that, really doesn't have all that much other purpose. And are we really imagining safety conditions that, there's 100-foot trees that could fall down a hell of a lot easier than these cell towers and crush you just as badly. So
I think more importantly, you might want to have a setback from an existing house, or existing residential lot line. Not that it has to be its own property, but you might not want it within 100 feet of a house, if you can
Right.
avoid it. So I think it's what are you trying to protect? And then create setbacks from what you're trying to be protect instead of, I don't know that having its own lot, I don't know what the advantage of that is. Unless somehow there's a tax aspect to it,
I mean,
No,
these
and I
are
thi-
areas that are leased, like Ren Fair, and doesn't the Iazetti property have a cell tower, and the one by Red Apple Rest? I mean,
Right,
if it falls down on their property.
right.
So, I think what you're saying about the setback from houses and roads and everything, anything else that could be damaged, that's where the setback should be.
yeah, plus
Well-
where are they allowed? I mean, can somebody just decide I'm going to put one in my backyard and screw my neighbors? Yeah, so if my neighbor was trying to put one in their backyard, I'd expect to have something to say about it.
Well,
But
that would be a good point, because right now the regulations in the code and the proposed code talk about the preference is to put them in a non-residential zoning district. But if you can't put it there, and the reality is if they need a tower, the federal regulations are going to trump. They're going to, or supersede. So they'll make the case that they need the tower and they will put it where they will. I think, that's a good point. I don't know that you want it on a property with a house, in the middle of a neighborhood. They don't typically do that, but, thinking
Well,
about
we
this,
have a
I don't know
say
that
about
there's
it in our
anything
code.
stopping it.
in our code, if we could put that in there, I would certainly be thinking that.
Except, let's take a step backwards here,
Go ahead.
because we're not just talking about towers. First of all, let me make 2 points as a structural engineer who designs things like towers. They're better designed than your house, and they're better insured than your house. And even more important than engineering is what the insurance company is willing to pay for. So trust me, they ain't falling down. If there's a high enough wind that the cell tower's falling down, we got bigger problems. But also, cell facilities are not necessarily perched on 150-foot high towers. It's quite possible that eventually St. Mary's or one of the other churches is going to make a big pile of money redoing their steeple with radio transparent panels on it and putting the cell tower in the top of the church.
Right.
And
those are co-locations, I think, which is a little different. When I was talking about setbacks, I'm specifically talking about new towers. Because there's DAS, systems that are going to be coming out, especially with 5G.
Yep.
Again, co-location. So you could be in a neighborhood if there's a water tower and it has the right height and it could co-locate on a water tower. I think that's different than suddenly having, your neighbor that's on a half acre behind you has enough lease area to suddenly put a big tower. I think that would be more of a concern.
Absolutely. But also, we're not just talking about safety. We were focused on safety, Jay, and I don't have it, I understand what you're saying. I agree. But the aesthetics, if all of a sudden I'm living in a beautiful neighborhood and all of a sudden now somebody's going to put some, galvanized steel tower on basically what abuts my front lawn, I think I should have something to say about that. Yeah, I really do. And I think, there's the safety angle and the aesthetics. So, if we have something to say here about this board, I'd like to see something that protects a homeowner from these kind of things. Yes, I would. Call me crazy.
I I could tell you that we had one recently in Monroe, and Monroe established their zoning. They actually have 3 spots where they allow cell towers. That was it. And so they were going to locate it on a water tank that's over at the townhouse development by Target. And they actually had to go for a use variance. They had to go to the zoning board of appeals, and they had to make the case that that was where they had to have it and get a variance. And so there are some things that, don't supersede as far as federal regulations. But I don't think there's any harm in trying to be restrictive when it comes to your residential neighborhoods and having some setbacks. And then anywhere else, as far as having an individual lot for it, I can ask Howard why he wanted an individual lot, but I don't know that that makes sense for that particular type of facility.
I think that it doesn't. I mean, I understand the concerns about placement and residential and all of that, but if the area is where it wants to be, then, I don't see why why it needs to have its own lot cut out.
Mhm.
There are a lot of reasons not to do that.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I'd be more
That part in
concerned.
particular doesn't seem to bother me because if it still takes into account the safety and the aesthetics, just of itself that it needs to have its own lot, that doesn't currently, in my thinking, seem to outweigh more the safety and the aesthetics. I'm not understanding, like Bonnie mentioned, because I've been to the Ren Fair site. And yeah, if you had to make a road that went down to 17A on that site, that wouldn't make much sense to me. This is a secluded spot and it's a very large lot. Somehow those landowners thought that was okay to do. It's not impinging upon any other neighbor that I could see. And even from a site line, when I drive by it, you wouldn't notice it very much.
Yeah, I mean, you can still have some kind of minimum lot area that has to be met with the other use on it. It doesn't have to be exclusive of another use being on it. That's just lot area, but to carve out another lot, I don't know that that's necessary, but I will ask, again, just because I may not be thinking of anything in particular, why did he ask, and kind of what was the situation that made him think that it might be useful, just so we know.
Well, if you were trying to summarize my 3 points, it would be, my concern would be in a residential area. I understand the safety concerns, but I lean towards what Jay was articulating. I agree. I have the same thought, that these towers they're not toppling. And I'd be way more concerned about the aesthetics. And I think also, like Jay said, not all of these towers, I absolutely know what you're talking about, Jay, that them locating these in church steeples and the like, in existing structures, like Bonnie was saying, on a water tank, that you're adding these, for lack of a better word, antennas that really don't add that much to the structure. Probably a lot of people wouldn't even notice it. I mean, if you were living okay with the water tank and they added a couple of antennas on the top, it doesn't seem to make it any less palatable. But those would be my concerns, Bonnie, if you could somehow articulate those to Howard.
Okay.
Thank you for everybody.
Sure. Okay. Anything else we need to discuss, or we're good for now? And then I'll work with Jay on the lighting to insert that, and any other final cleanup items. And Howard will weigh in on the questions and comments we had for him, and we can get a final draft to you.
Absolutely. And the only thing I'd ask, if you, with the lighting law, I know that there were people had comments. If you could just do me a favor of sending them to me again in the next couple of days, and then
Yeah, I'll
you'll have
look from, you know, the little research I had was basically just saying, you know, most of the reason rationale that people in the home setting that quote is you know, anti-crime safety kind of things. And, you know, I just provided some evidence that in a couple of bullets that that's not really true. And again, I'd be just looking for the simple things of time and motion and the notion of light infiltration, you know, that the goal is to not infiltrate, or what do you light pollution, light infiltration on another person's property, you know, that it's expected that homeowners don't do that. However, the two simplest things to me are the clock and the motion detector. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know of any other simple fixes that are enforceable.
Okay, great.
And if you do, please, I don't know, you know, other than shielding and, you know, I'm not a professional on light bulbs, but, you know, certainly in theater, there's spotlighting and, you know, lights that don't infiltrate all over the place. If somebody's trying to illuminate a specific place on their home, you know, why can't that be shielded or directed where you're trying to have that light? You don't need to illuminate the whole neighborhood, you know?
Absolutely.
If there's anything in there that could be put in, you know, about types of bulbs and shielding, that would be super. And then we'll see if these two neighbors in Clinton Woods somehow learn to get along. And then we know we solved the problem. Because I like Maria's idea that wouldn't it be great if the neighbors can get along? But then the 10 o'clock news wouldn't have so much to report about all the neighbors that want to kill each other.
Well,
Sounds good. Anybody else? Anything else? I think we've covered my items that I had sent over. And so again, we'll do the cleanup. I'll get to Howard. Jay and I will work together on adding the lighting and the other cleanups and, you know, the stereo version and go from there.
okay.
So how
And
close are we to a public hearing and a final version?
So the draft will be circulated to you. I think I need to talk to Howard. Does this get circulated to the planning board again for review, or does essentially, because that's happened already once. It does need to go to Orange County for general municipal law review. The law is supposed to be on your desks, I think 7 days. There's some minimum that it has to get for you. And then you have to set the public hearing, so there's a notification requirement. So I'm thinking it's July 7th. We're talking about probably the end of June for a public hearing.
it's June 7th.
June 7th. So I'm just taking notes on what you're saying. So first there's a draft. It's not unclear whether we have to circulate it to
Yeah, to the planning board again, right.
I mean, they originally kicked it back to us, right?
Yes, that's why I'm not certain that it has to or not. It should go back to Orange County for general municipal law review. And it has to be accompanied, we have to prepare an environmental assessment form for that.
So when we get the draft, we're not starting to nitpick this again, right? What are we looking at when we get the draft? Just
doing the circulations to the various agencies. No nitpicking, you know, get it out to everybody who has to review it, you know, that's required to review it. Then have a public hearing and then deal with any nits and last changes once you also have comments in from the public. But really the idea right now is to circulate, find out if it has to go to the planning board. If it doesn't, it has to go to the county. You know, I'm sure Howard's going to recommend that. And set the public hearing.
I mean, so the public hearing, we're supposed to consider resonating comments, something that somebody brings up and says, you know what, that sounds reasonable to this board that we didn't think of and didn't consider, right?
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
public hearing doesn't mean somehow we have to work in everybody's opinion on everything, right? I mean, I
No,
think-
and a perfect example may be my neighbor is running an Airbnb and I have issues. And so you're not going to tackle it now, but you tackle it, if you want to in the next go around. So really you're just trying to get zoning in place, new zoning that will regulate, you can get out of your moratorium. And then, honestly, it's not uncommon to have some edits and amendments after someone's worked with it, after a board has worked with it for a year. And as you go along, Hyde Park, I could tell you, they amend their zoning probably once every 2 months because they just don't anticipate everything. And given COVID, given changes, they have to deal with now the Airbnbs, the tenters, where things are popping up, event venues, things that have kind of evolved out of our changing economy. So it's going to happen, and
Yeah.
when you can get to it. But this is like a huge hurdle, this is the entire zoning. And just to put it in place so that next time when you tackle some of these specific items, it's not like you have to necessarily go into a moratorium, or if you do, it's only related to those specific uses, not the entire town and all the uses practically.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. So
Uh,
I'll talk to Howard and we could send out an email or a memo of the steps in the adoption process so that, the only thing I want to talk to him is about referrals, whether he thinks it has to go back to the planning board. And then you need to decide, if it goes to the planning board, does the planning board just review it? Who gets involved? Because that's, expense to you. So I think you just need to be part of that discussion. With
I think one of the
review.
problems that we had was that we extended this building moratorium, and I think I forget what the date was where that expired, and I think it was determined that we either couldn't extend it again, or am I remembering that correctly, Jay?
We still have the opportunity to extend it at least another 3 months.
Okay.
We said
Not that we wanted
we said we
to,
didn't want to. And basically, we said we want to have a draft to the public by the end of June.
Okay.
We'll still need to extend it because there's a process that needs to be
Right.
followed. But we'll have the reason, right? We're not just pushing it off and
Kicking the
pushing it
can,
off.
yeah.
Here's the draft.
It's there. Yeah.
Here's what it is. We're going to have the meeting. Everybody read quick. I mean, I've already had some comments from people, how much review we're going to need, and are you guys going to give us a decoder ring? And the answer is it's 150 odd pages, and I mumbled about the decoder ring. No, people can read it all by themselves. And if they have questions, they can ask them. But we don't have there ain't enough public meeting in the world to read through every line of this. People are going to have to do their homework before they come.
And people
Yeah, I think so.
gravitate to the elements that most address their concerns. I mean, if you don't live next to a gas station, you might not read that section all that heavily. And you might read the sections that deal with the part of town that you live in. And, those are all those concerns. Which perspective are you looking at? Do you live next door to the guy with the floodlights? Do you live next door to the guy who wants an Airbnb? Those are all real concerns,
Yeah, and I think when we do the public meetings, we may need more than one, or we may need to do breakout sessions. But I also think it's going to need to be one of those things that basically says, thanks for raising that. Could you please write that down and send it to us so that we can,
Yeah. You're not
Have-
obligated at public hearings, and it's more about how you operate as a board. You take the public hearing comment in, you don't have to respond that evening. You take the comments and then, then you as a board talk about them, what needs to be addressed, if anything. But it's really to hear any reaction they may have to the changes.
Right.
Well, that's something this board does get challenged by. I mean, we respond to chats in every meeting, and that needs to be addressed because that's not typically how these meetings work. It's in a public hearing, we're supposed to listen. It's not a dialogue necessarily. A board member can ask a question of somebody who's speaking, but that's for the clarity of the board member, not to engage in a debate or a dialogue. And certainly at town board meetings, we shouldn't be responding to everything that comes in the chat. Just imagine at a public meeting, if we just let everybody call out in the middle of the meeting and we're going to respond to what they say, it's bedlam. And I think that's a bad precedent, but.
Well, for a public
Typically
hearing,
about
it should
public
be-
hearings, so.
the public hearing should be 3 minutes a person. And we need to organize it that way, otherwise it'll be crazy.
Yeah, there needs to be a sign-in sheet and,
Right.
and
There's usually a time period to accept, let someone speak for 3 minutes, get their ideas out. And then if a significant property owner has a lot of comments, they'll typically submit a written, something written for you to consider.
I know that in school boards, for the hearings, people say, yeah, they have 3 minutes. They're not expected, the board members aren't expected to answer back to the comment.
absolutely not. How could you give a considered response? The question or the person who comes before, to the lectern and they've been working this up in their head for 3 weeks and you got to try to respond in 30 seconds to whatever they throw at you, that's irresponsible as far as I'm concerned. I have no problem telling somebody, look, if you want a reflective answer, I can't give it to you off the top of my head. That's ridiculous. And so that's why public hearing, first of all, it's not fair to the next person who's waiting for their 2 minutes that and then, you chose to comment to this person, but then I gave my comment and you had nothing to say. That's another reason why that's not good practice.
Quick question. Where are you as far as starting in-person meetings? Are you still holding off on that?
No, well, I asked Howard, he's expecting another extension, but it's clearly going towards the desire to have, in-person meetings. And so
Okay.
we're trying to up our games at Town Hall technologically so we can continue to do stream meetings. But whether that's in place or not, we need to go back to in-person meetings. But it seems to be you still can restrict the amount of people that are in the room, because right now we're expected to do the honor system from what I read as to whether people have been vaccinated or not, which is just another way of almost using the word recommendation. It gives you no real guideline as to what you're supposed to do. So, I don't personally feel comfortable being in a room that is going to be jam tight with people. No, I don't feel comfortable with that. My mother-in-law is in a nursing home right now with COVID and pneumonia. And, so no, this has not gone away. And so.
Sorry to hear that.
No, I'm just saying that, people think they're not testing people like the way they was. So when they say there's less than 0.5% of testing, well, I'd want to know how many people are being tested, So. But anyway, now to the question, we need to move towards public meetings, and I can anticipate that. We have the 28th, the executive order was scheduled to end, I think, on the 24th, which was a Thursday. And then Howard said, I think it's been extended to July 5th or something. But that just kicked the can down the road like a week or so.
So if it's going to be kept until July 5th and we have a public hearing before then, it will likely be via WebEx. Is that-
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think as we get closer, we'll just continue to communicate to see where we are, because I think the presentation materials that we might prepare could be a little different if it's in person versus if it is, well, maybe not, because you have the projector there, right? You have your TV.
I think a topic, public hearing of this magnitude on something that's literally been worked on for decades, I think we
Yeah.
need to find a different venue than the community room of town hall.
Yeah,
I think we
Yeah.
should anticipate a crowd. I think we should try to do either the auditorium at the school or rent a space, that can accommodate 100 people or more, and with some social distancing.
Yeah, well, I'd say the auditorium of the school makes sense if we can come to an arrangement with them.
I tried about just doing town board meetings and the checklist was pretty extensive. It wasn't like, oh yeah, sure, we can make that happen.
Then maybe we can talk to. Well, all right. We'll see what we can come up with.
yeah, I think it's gonna depend on the date that you land on and where you are with the restrictions. So right now, just anticipate that it's going to be via WebEx, and if that changes, we'll deal with it at that point. I'm vaccinated, so not to lighten COVID and what it still can do, but
no.
yeah,
I'm vaccinated for months and I'm just looking for something between everybody going back to a
Yeah.
subway and
right. I
being
agree.
paranoid that I have to be out at the Grand Canyon to have a meeting,
Right.
I'm
Understand.
comfortable with a few people and we open the windows. Like if the town board members were starting to get together and we just at least spread out in the community room and the windows were open, I'd be fine with that. That to me is the next step. And Jay and I were talking about the technological issues, whether all our laptops would work in the same room. But I pointed out and we discussed, well, there's a lot of PCs in town hall. So there is a way, if that became a challenge, we could, and we do have a large screen. Michelle and I have done a few meetings trying to use that large screen in the room. And successfully, we did when we did the training on the employment manual, we had, I don't know, about 20 town employees, 15 to 20, and we used the big screen and Michael Richardson did his thing from his house. And that went well. So it's not the first time we did it.
Right.
And,
Okay.
but if we did a town board meeting, I'm mostly speaking to my colleagues, that you would have to restrict the number of people, the audience, because we know how many town board members there are, but I would have no idea how many people potentially could show up for the first town board meeting. So maybe we'd have to have some kind of an RSVP that if you say you're coming, we let in the first 15 people or something. I don't know. We'd have to kind of look at that. But I'm towards trying to get this happening, and I appreciate, everybody's response. And that's what I'm thinking. Let's start out with one meeting that we at least try. And I was thinking even as early as the 14th, which is a week from tonight, do we get together in town hall and still keep the public out, but at least we get in the same room and try to figure out, where would we be comfortable? The 5 of us on that stage, I really don't like that idea. That's me personally.
So I can tell you in the town of Montgomery, the planning board and the town board have been meeting for some time. And they do the hybrid where they either on Facebook or somewhere they're streaming the meeting. If someone so everybody from the planning board is there, but they're spaced apart. The consultants are there, they're at separate tables. In the audience, all the chairs are spaced apart. So it's not the capacity that you would normally have. They're adhering to distances. And then anybody who signed up, but because of the capacity couldn't be admitted, there's a way to stream it where they can watch. And then there's a phone number that they can call the planning board chairman and he can take, the comments. So there are ways to do it. And that's actually what has been done in other communities. Shawangham's another one, spacing the seating, that's
That's pretty
very
much what I
common.
was thinking, Bonnie, that we got in the room. The technology we've been using as we are right now, even if everybody just had their own laptop, and headsets, I think it would work. And if it didn't, then we could at least space out in the building and then realize, no, that didn't work. And if we were all in the building together next Monday night, we could even start putting the chairs out and say, okay, we need this much space. How many audience members does it seem like we could put in here? That's my thinking. It's not all that sophisticated, but I'm trying to work with the technology that we already have. I have reached out to New Windsor IT, and yes, Jay, it doesn't seem like they're going to be the answer, and they are our IT people, but obviously we need to go with something other than them because they said they can't do it. So, okay, you're off the list. Certainly some kind of, I'm not even going to suppose what the system would look like, but I've been in plenty of conference rooms that have cameras, and microphones that capture the whole room. But I'm still not sure why we all couldn't necessarily just have work from our own laptops and have a station, a lectern, where an audience member steps up to that laptop, so to speak. But maybe I'm wrong about that. I really don't know. But certainly you can't just have open mics, the headset idea, I think, is a necessity. But anyway, thanks to everybody, Jay and Bonnie, for moving this forward, and all to our board members, Maria and Michelle and Marissa. We continue to persevere and keep it going. I think we should all be proud about that. I don't take anything offense, we got to be able to speak openly and sharing ideas respectfully. I think we do that very well. And so thank you.
Yep, we're almost there.
We're almost there. And Marissa, if you're still there, God bless you. I couldn't imagine sitting through that all this time, but we need to close the meeting though. All right, this is a public meeting. So
I'm
if
still here.
everybody's okay with that, I'm going to make a motion to close the meeting at 9:26 according to my computer. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Maria, second the closing of the meeting at 9:22. I'll take a quick vote. I'll start with you, Maria.
Aye.
Michelle Lindsay.
Aye. Aye.
I'll go to Jay Reichka
Aye.
and Ken English. Aye, that's three. So we got it. And Bonnie, you could throw in an aye just for the hell of it.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Well, thank you.
All
This
right.
meeting is closed. I'll see my board members certainly on the 14th. And we will have the public hearing on the 17th. We did pass that at 7 p.m. Jay, myself, and Michelle are committed, and Maria will hopefully make it from California, but we understand if you can't. So thank you, everybody.
Yep. And
Thank you.
Bonnie,
Have a great night.
check your
and
calendar. Check your calendar, Bonnie. We'll figure out some times.
Okay, sounds good. Thank
Good
you
night,
all.
Michelle.
Everybody.
Good night.
Good night,
Have a good
everybody.
night. Bye,
Thanks for
guys.
hosting, Michelle.